The sphere had been sitting in the vault for 11,000 years, and in all that time, it had done nothing. It was about the size of a human head, made from a metal that no one could identify. Strange patterns covered its surface, lines that curved and twisted and seemed to move when you looked at them from different angles. The people had found it buried deep under the ruins of a civilization so old that no one remembered its name. They had brought it to the Galactic Archaeological Institute, the greatest research center in all the known worlds, hoping that someone could figure out what it was. They never did. Every species in the Galactic Compact had tried to make it work. The who could bend the laws of physics with their minds. The whose brains could connect directly to any machine ever built. The beings made of living crystal who could think faster than light could travel. Even the ancient, who claimed to remember the birth of stars, had touched the sphere and felt nothing at all. It responded to no signal. It answered no call. It ignored every attempt at communication that the 12,000-member species of the Compact could think of. So they gave it a name. They called it the Dead Stone. And then they forgot about it. Was 23 years old, and she had been working at the Institute for exactly 7 months. She was a junior research assistant, which was a fancy way of saying that she cleaned things. She dusted the artifacts. She checked the temperature controls. She made sure the displays were working properly. And every night, when the real scientists went home, she walked through the empty halls of the vault and made sure everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. She was human from a small planet called Earth that had only joined the Galactic Compact about 200 years ago. Compared to the other species, humans were practically bobbies. They had no special abilities, no mental powers, no ancient wisdom. They were just ordinary, and was ordinary even by human standards. She did not mind her job. She liked the quiet. She liked being surrounded by objects that had seen the rise and fall of empires, and she especially liked the Dead Stone, even though she did not know why. There was something about it, something warm. When she cleaned its surface, she could feel a kind of heat coming from inside it, like a heartbeat that was waiting to start again. None of the scientists had ever mentioned this, so she assumed it was just her imagination. But still, she found herself spending more time with the Dead Stone than with any other artifact in the vault. On the night that everything changed, was alone. It was late, well past midnight by Earth time, and the Institute was empty except for the security systems and the soft hum of the environmental controls. Walked through the vault with her cleaning supplies, checking each artifact one by one, until she finally reached the Dead Stone at the center of the room. She set down her supplies and picked up a soft cloth. Then she began to clean the sphere, running the fabric gently over its strange surface, following the lines of the patterns that seemed to shift beneath her fingers. She was not thinking about anything important. Her mind was far away, drifting through memories of home. She thought about her grandmother who had passed away 3 years ago. She thought about the songs her grandmother used to sing, old songs from a country called Korea, songs about mountains and rivers and the moon. Without realizing it, began to hum one of those songs, her voice soft and low in the empty vault. The cloth moved over the metal. The patterns seemed to dance in the dim light, and kept humming, lost in the memory of her grandmother's voice. She did not notice when the sphere began to glow. At first, it was just a faint light, barely visible, like the first hint of dawn on the horizon. But it grew stronger, brighter, spreading out from the center of the sphere in waves of soft golden color. The patterns on the surface began to move, really move, rotating and shifting and folding through angles that should not have been possible. Stopped humming. She stared at the sphere in her hands, her eyes wide with shock. The light grew brighter still. It filled the vault, pushing back the shadows, turning everything gold. A sound began to build, deep and low, like a heartbeat the size of a planet. Could feel it in her chest, in her bones, in every part of her body. And then the sphere spoke. Not in words, not in any language she knew, but somehow she understood. It was reaching out to her, touching her mind, trying to tell her something that it had been waiting 11,000 years to say. Drop the cloth. She stumbled backward, her legs weak, her hands shaking. The sphere hung in the air where she had left it, floating on its own, surrounded by light and sound and something that felt like joy. Alarms began to scream throughout the institute. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Somewhere, doors were slamming open and footsteps were pounding against the floor. Within minutes, the vault was full of people, scientists in white coats, security guards with weapons drawn, administrators shouting into communicators. They all stopped when they saw the sphere, their faces pale with disbelief. Doctor, the director of the institute, pushed his way through the crowd. He was a tall man with silver hair and tired eyes, a man who had spent his whole life studying the mysteries of the ancient universe. He had seen many strange things in his career, but he had never seen anything like this. He stared at the floating sphere, at the light that poured from its surface, at the patterns that danced like living things. Then he turned to look at the only person who had been in the vault when it happened. Stood alone, small and frightened, her cleaning cloth still lying on the floor at her feet. "What did you do?" Doctor asked. His voice was quiet, but there was something in it that had never heard before, something like fear. "I do not know," she whispered. "I was just cleaning it, I touched it like I always do, and then it just woke up." Doctor looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the sphere, which was still glowing, still floating, still alive for the first time in 11,000 years. "That is impossible," he said. "Thousands of researchers have touched this artifact, beings from thousands of different species. It never responded to any of them." "I know," said, her voice was very small now. "I know." The sphere pulsed once, twice, 3 times. The light shifted, forming shapes in the air. Symbols, patterns, something that looked almost like a map, with lines connecting points of light across a vast darkness. Everyone in the vault stared at it in silence. Looked at her hands, the same hands that had touched the sphere, the same hands that had somehow done what no one else in the galaxy could do. They were shaking. They were ordinary hands, attached to an ordinary girl from an ordinary planet. But something had changed. Something had begun. And deep in her heart, in a place she did not even know existed, felt a door opening that could never be closed again. The dead stone was dead no more. And the universe, for the first time in a very long time, was paying attention. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The dead stone had awakened. After 11,000 years of silence, the most mysterious artifact in the Galactic Compact had finally responded. And it had responded to a human, not a master of quantum science, not a neural specialist, not an ancient sage, a human cleaning girl who had been polishing its surface while humming a song from her dead grandmother. Within hours, ships began arriving at the Institute from every corner of known space. Scientists, politicians, military commanders, religious leaders, everyone wanted to see the sphere, everyone wanted to understand what had happened, and everyone wanted to know why. Was not allowed to leave. They gave her a small room in the residential wing of the Institute, comfortable but clearly designed to keep her contained. Guards stood outside her door at all times. Researchers came and went, asking her the same questions over and over again. What had she been thinking when she touched the sphere? What had she felt? What had she heard? She told them the truth. She had been thinking about her grandmother. She had felt warmth. She had heard something that was not quite a voice, something that seemed to come from inside her own mind rather than from outside. They did not believe her. Or rather, they believed her, but they did not understand. How could someone so ordinary do something so extraordinary? There had to be an explanation. There had to be something special about her that they had not discovered yet. So they tested her. They scanned her brain with machines that could map every neuron, every synapse, every electrical impulse. They analyzed her blood, searching for unusual chemicals or genetic markers. They examined her cells under microscopes so powerful they could see individual atoms. They ran psychological evaluations, intelligence tests, personality assessments. They found nothing. Was, by every measure they could think of, completely normal, average intelligence, average physical abilities, average everything. There was nothing in her biology or her psychology that could explain what had happened in the vault. Doctor watched all of this with growing frustration. He had been studying ancient artifacts for 40 years, and he had never encountered anything that explanation so completely. The sphere should not have responded to anyone, and if it was going to respond, it should have responded to someone important, someone with gifts or abilities that matched its ancient power. Instead, it had chosen a girl who cleaned floors. On the 5th day after the awakening, they decided to run a direct test. The vault had been cleared of all other artifacts and filled with monitoring equipment. Cameras recorded every angle. Sensors measured every form of energy known to science. Researchers from a dozen different species stood behind protective barriers, their instruments ready, their attention focused on the sphere that floated at the center of the room. It had not stopped glowing since had touched it. The light was softer now, pulsing gently like a sleeping heartbeat, but it was still there, still waiting. First, they brought in a scientist. His name was, and he was one of the most respected researchers in the compact. He could manipulate quantum fields with his mind. He could perceive dimensions that most species could not even imagine. He approached the sphere slowly, respectfully, and placed his four-fingered hand against its surface. Nothing happened. The sphere continued to pulse with its soft light, but it did not respond to his touch. He tried for several minutes, using every technique he knew, reaching out with his mind as well as his body. The sphere ignored him completely. Next, they brought in a specialist. They were partly organic and partly synthetic, with neural networks that could interface directly with technology. The specialist extended thin filaments from her fingertips and touched the sphere, trying to establish a connection. Nothing. The sphere remained silent. They tried a being of living crystal whose thoughts moved at the speed of light. They tried a elder, a creature so ancient that he had personally witnessed the birth of stars. They tried representatives from 17 different species, each one bringing their unique abilities to bear on the mysterious artifact. The sphere responded to none of them. Then they brought in. She walked into the vault slowly, feeling the weight of all those watching eyes. She was still wearing the simple uniform of a cleaning assistant, and she had not slept properly in days. She looked small and tired and completely out of place among all these powerful beings and sophisticated machines. Doctor nodded to her from behind the protective barrier. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were intense. Approached the sphere. It floated before her, pulsing gently, its patterns still shifting across its surface. She remembered the first time she had seen it, months ago when she had started her job at the institute. She remembered thinking that it was beautiful in a strange and lonely way. She raised her hand, and the moment her fingers touched the metal, the sphere exploded with light. Golden radiance filled the vault, so bright that several of the watching researchers had to look away. The patterns on the sphere's surface began to spin, faster and faster, creating shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The deep heartbeat sound returned, stronger than before, filling the air with its ancient rhythm. But this time, there was something more. Images appeared in the light, star maps, coordinates, a journey across the galaxy traced in lines of fire and shadow, and at the end of that journey a place, a world that burned with inner light, orbiting a star that existed where no star should be, at the very center of the galaxy. And a message. It came to not as words, but as meaning, pressed directly into her mind. She could feel it settling into her thoughts like water soaking into earth. "We have been waiting," gasped and pulled her hand back. The light faded, the images disappeared, but the message remained, echoing in her mind like the memory of a dream. She turned to look at Doctor and the other researchers. They were staring at her with expressions of shock, wonder, and fear. "What did it say?" Doctor asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Swallowed hard. Her throat was dry and her heart was pounding in her chest. "It said they have been waiting," she answered. "Waiting for me, for someone like me. I do not understand why. I am nobody. I am nothing special." Doctor looked at the sphere, then back at. For the first time since she had known him, he looked truly afraid. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "that is exactly what makes you special." The sphere pulsed once more, as if in agreement. And somewhere in the depths of his mind, something ancient and patient smiled. The Galactic Council met on a station that orbited a dying star. It was the oldest gathering place in the compact, built by species that had turned to dust long before humanity learned to use fire. Here, the representatives of 1,000 worlds came together to discuss matters that affected all of known civilization. And today, they were discussing a human cleaning girl and the artifact that had chosen her. Sat in a small chair at the center of a vast chamber. The ceiling arched high above her, so high that it seemed to disappear into darkness. Around her, arranged in rising tiers that stretched up like the inside of a mountain, sat the representatives of the compact. Thousands of them, beings of every shape and size imaginable. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no physical bodies at all, existing only as patterns of light and energy. They were all staring at her. High Arbiter spoke first. He was and his crystalline body caught the light of the dying star outside, breaking it into 1,000 colors that danced across the chamber walls. "You claim to have no knowledge of this artifact," he said. His voice was like the sound of wind through glass. "No special training, no connection to the civilization that created it." "That is true," said. Her voice sounded very small in the massive chamber. "I am just a cleaning assistant. I was hired 7 months ago to maintain the artifacts in the vault. I have no scientific education. I do not understand ancient technology." "And yet," continued, "this artifact responds only to you. In 11,000 years it has ignored the greatest minds of our civilization. Masters of science, warriors of legend, beings with powers that could reshape the stars themselves. It ignored all of them. And then a human girl touches its surface and it awakens." He leaned forward, his crystal face impossible to read. "You must understand our difficulty in believing this is mere chance." Understood. She also understood that many of the beings in this chamber were afraid of her, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. Something unknown, something outside their control. "I do not know why it chose me," she said. "I wish I did. I have asked myself this question every moment since it happened, but I have no answer." A elder spoke next. His name was, and he was older than some of the stars visible through the chamber's windows. His body was like a cloud of silver dust, constantly shifting, held together by a will that had endured for millions of years. "Perhaps the question is not why it chose her," said. "Perhaps the question is what it wants." The chamber fell silent at his words. In the weeks since the awakening, Doctor and his team had been working constantly to understand the sphere's messages. They had developed translation algorithms, studied the patterns of light and energy, analyzed every image that the artifact had projected. And slowly, piece by piece, they had begun to decode its meaning. What they had found had shocked them all. "The artifact," Doctor announced to the council, "is a beacon, a message left behind by the architects." The chamber erupted into noise. Representatives shouted, questioned. The architects were myth, legend, the supposed creators of the Great Gates, the network of portals that connected the galaxy and made interstellar civilization possible. For thousands of years, scholars had debated whether they ever truly existed. No one had ever found any evidence of them. Until now, we have confirmed this through multiple analysis methods, Doctor continued, his voice cutting through the noise. The technology used in this artifact is identical to the technology used in the Great Gates, the same materials, the same energy patterns, the same mathematical principles. This sphere was created by the same beings who built the gates. The chamber slowly fell quiet again. "What does the beacon say?" asked High Arbiter. Doctor hesitated, then he looked at. "Perhaps she should show you." They had brought the sphere to the council chamber. It floated beside, still pulsing with its gentle golden light. She turned to it now and reached out her hand. The moment she touched it, the chamber transformed. Light erupted from the sphere, filling the vast space, painting every surface with images and symbols. The representatives gasped as the history of the universe unfolded before their eyes. They saw the galaxy as it was billions of years ago, young and wild and empty of intelligent life. They saw the first sparks of civilization appearing, scattered across the stars like seeds on the wind. They saw these civilizations grow, expand, reach out to one another across the void. And they saw the architects. They were beings of pure light, entities that had evolved beyond physical form, existing as patterns of energy and thought. They had built the great gates to connect the young civilizations of the galaxy, to allow them to share and grow and learn from one another. But they had also seen the danger. As civilizations connected, they changed each other. They shared technology, merged cultures, modified their own biology to adapt and improve. Over millions of years, every species in the galaxy became something different from what it had been. Something mixed, something changed. The architects had watched this happen with growing concern. They valued diversity. They valued originality. They believed that the true strength of life lay in its variety, in the unique perspectives that each species brought to the universe. So they had made a decision. They had built beacons, thousands of them, scattered across the galaxy. Each one was designed to wait, to watch, to search for something specific. Not the most powerful species, not the most advanced, but the most original, the most unchanged. The images showed worlds being hidden, protected, quarantined by the architects. Worlds where life was allowed to evolve in isolation, without contact from the greater galaxy. Worlds that would preserve the original diversity of the universe. Earth was one of those worlds. The images faded. The light dimmed. Pulled her hand back from the sphere, her face pale with the weight of what she had witnessed. "The beacon waited for 11,000 years, she said, her voice shaking. It tested every species that touched it, searching for the one thing it was programmed to find: originality, a being that was still what it was meant to be, unchanged, unmodified." She looked up at the council, at all those ancient and powerful beings who had shaped the destiny of the galaxy for millions of years. "It found me," she said, "not because I am special, but because I am still original, because humanity has never been changed. We are still exactly what we were when we first looked up at the stars and wondered what they were." The chamber was completely silent. Then slowly the sphere began to glow again. New images appeared. A star at the center of the galaxy, a world of light, a doorway waiting to be opened. And a voice, speaking directly into the minds of everyone present. "The child of Earth will carry our message. She will open the door, and everything will change." Closed her eyes. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be important. She was just a girl who cleaned floors and hummed her grandmother's songs and missed the blue sky of Earth. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The question would not leave alone. "Why me?" She asked it in the quiet hours of the night, when she could not sleep. She asked it when she looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw the same ordinary face she had seen all her life. She asked it when she walked through the corridors of the station and felt the stares of beings who had lived for thousands of years, beings who could bend reality with their thoughts, beings who had built empires across the stars. Why her? Why a cleaning girl from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy? Why someone with no power, no gifts, no special abilities at all? 3 weeks after the council meeting, she found Doctor in his laboratory. He had barely slept since the awakening. His eyes were red, his hair was messy, and empty cups of coffee covered every surface of his desk. But when entered, he looked up with something like hope. "I think I understand," he said. Sat down across from him. The sphere floated beside her as it always did now. It had not left her side since the awakening, following her like a loyal pet, pulsing gently with its eternal golden light. "Tell me," she said. Doctor pulled up a holographic display. It showed genetic data, comparing the DNA of hundreds of different species from across the galaxy. Lines of information scrolled past, too fast for to read, but the patterns were clear enough. "We have been thinking about this problem incorrectly," Doctor explained. "We assumed the sphere was looking for something special, some unique ability or rare genetic marker that would identify a chosen individual. And it is not. No," he highlighted a section of the data. "Look at this. This is the genetic code of a, see these sections here. These were added about 2 million years ago when the first made contact with the. They adopted neural technology and modified their own genetics to support it." He switched to another display. "This is a silicon-based life, completely different from carbon-based species. But look here. These mathematical patterns in their crystalline structure were from the about 3 million years ago. They saw how efficient the thought processes were and rewrote their own minds to match." Stared at the displays, beginning to understand. "Every species in the compact has been changed," Doctor continued. "Somewhere in their history they met other civilizations. They traded technology. They merged cultures. They improved themselves by copying the best features of others. It is natural. It is how civilizations grow. But it also means that nothing in the galaxy is truly original anymore." He looked at with an expression she had never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, something like wonder. "Except humans." Felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Doctor pulled up a new display. Earth, floating in space, surrounded by swirling clouds of gas and debris. "Your world was hidden," he said. "Quarantined by cosmic accident. The stellar phenomena around your solar system made it invisible to the Great Gates for billions of years. By the time we developed technology advanced enough to detect Earth, your species had already evolved. You had already become what you were meant to be." He leaned forward. "You are not special because of something you have. You are special because of something you do not have. You have never been changed, never been modified, never been improved by contact with other civilizations. You are still exactly what evolution intended you to be." Looked at her hands, the same hands that had touched the sphere, the same hands that had opened something that had been locked for 11,000 years. They looked so ordinary, so human. "The architects did not want power," she said slowly, understanding finally coming to her. "They did not want intelligence or strength or any of those things." "No," Doctor agreed. "They wanted originality, a fresh perspective. Someone who still saw the universe the way their species was meant to see it, without layers of borrowed thoughts and adopted ideas. They wanted something new, something pure." The sphere pulsed brighter for a moment, as if agreeing with his words. "That is why the other species could not activate the beacon," said. "Not because they were not good enough, but because they had already changed too much. They had lost the original pattern of their minds." "Yes," Doctor nodded, "and that is why humanity was chosen, not because you are better, not because you are worthy, simply because you are new. You are the only truly original species left in the galaxy." Sat in silence for a long time, absorbing this truth. She had spent her whole life feeling ordinary, feeling invisible, feeling like nothing she did really mattered in the grand scheme of things. But now she understood that her ordinariness was the most extraordinary thing about her. The sphere floated closer, brushing against her shoulder like a friend offering comfort. More images flowed into her mind. The world at the center of the galaxy, the doorway waiting to be opened, the architects watching from their realm of light, patient after billions of years. "They left something for us," whispered. "A gift, a key to something that has been locked away since the beginning of time." "What kind of gift?" Doctor asked. Closed her eyes and let the sphere's visions wash over her. She saw the great gates as they existed now, limited, controlled, connecting only certain worlds to certain others. And she saw something else. Another network hidden beneath the first, larger, more powerful, connecting everything to everything. "The gates we use now are only a small part of what the architects built," she said. "They created a second network, a complete one, but they locked it away because the galaxy was not ready. Too many species had already lost their original nature. Too many minds had been changed by contact with others." She opened her eyes and looked at Doctor. They were waiting for someone who could still see clearly, someone whose thoughts had never been shaped by anyone else, someone who could make a choice with a truly fresh perspective. Doctor's face was pale, and now stood up, the sphere rose with her, its light growing stronger. "Now they want me to come to them, to receive the key, to decide whether the galaxy is ready for what they have to offer." She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Billions of them, scattered across the darkness like dust on black velvet, each one a sun, each one surrounded by worlds full of beings who had been waiting, whether they knew it or not, for this moment. "I am just a cleaning girl," she said softly. "I do not know if I can make that kind of decision." Doctor stood and walked to stand beside her. "Perhaps that is exactly why you should make it," he said. "Because you are not burdened by the weight of ancient wisdom, because you can still be surprised, because you can still hope." Looked at the sphere. It pulsed gently, waiting. Somewhere at the center of the galaxy, the architects were waiting too, and knew, with a certainty that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than thought, that she would go to them, not because she was chosen, not because she was special, but because sometimes the universe needed someone ordinary to do something extraordinary. She reached out and touched the sphere one more time. "Show me the way," she said. And the sphere began to sing. The ship was small, built for a single person. The Galactic Council had offered her a fleet, warships to protect her, scientists to accompany her, diplomats to speak on behalf of all the civilizations of the Compact, had refused them all. The sphere had been clear. The invitation was for her alone. She stood in the hangar of the station, looking at the little vessel that would carry her to the center of the galaxy. Doctor stood beside her, his face tired but calm. They had known each other for only a few months, but somehow it felt like much longer. Shared strangeness had a way of creating bonds that time alone could not. "The Council is still afraid," Doctor said. "They do not understand why you must go alone." "I know," replied. "I do not fully understand it myself, but the architects chose this way for a reason. They have been watching the galaxy for billions of years. They know things we cannot imagine." Doctor nodded slowly. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a music player, old and worn, the kind that humans had used on Earth before the age of space travel. "I found this in your personnel file," he said. "It belonged to your grandmother. The Institute kept it as part of the standard cultural documentation for human employees." Took it with trembling hands. She pressed the play button, and a familiar voice filled the air. Her grandmother, singing the old songs from Korea. The same songs had been humming when the sphere first awakened. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Come back safely," Doctor said. "Whatever you find out there, whatever choice you make, come back and tell us about it. The galaxy will be waiting." hugged him, this stern scientist who had somehow become her friend. Then she walked to her ship, climbed inside, and closed the door behind her. The journey took 3 weeks. The sphere guided her through regions of space that no map had ever recorded, past dead stars and newborn nebulas, through fields of cosmic radiation that should have destroyed her ship instantly, but instead parted before her like curtains of light, into the deep heart of the galaxy, where the stars grew so thick that the sky was more fire than darkness. And finally, she reached the dead zone. Every civilization in the compact had avoided this region for as long as records existed. Ships that entered never returned. Probes sent back nothing but silence. There were legends about what waited here. Monsters, gods, the ghosts of species that had died before the universe was young. Flew in without hesitation. What she found was a gate. Not like the great gates that connected the worlds of the compact. Those were small, just big enough to pass a single starship through. This gate was the size of a moon. Its surface was covered with the same spiraling patterns as the sphere, all of them moving, all of them alive. It hung in space like a door into somewhere else, surrounded by a ring of stars that seemed to bow toward it in worship. And through that door, she could see another world. A world of light. A world where the sky was made of colors that had no names. A world orbiting a star that existed where physics said no star could survive. The home of the architects. Brought her ship to rest before the great gate. The sphere floated out of its container and drifted toward the viewing window, pulsing with excitement like a child returning home after a long journey. Then a voice spoke in her mind. It was not like the messages from the sphere. This was deeper, fuller, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the voice of beings who had watched the birth and death of galaxies, beings who had built the framework that held civilization together, beings who had waited for this moment longer than humanity had existed. You came. You invited me, said simply. We invited many, the voice replied, over billions of years. You are the first to answer. Stared at the gate, at the world beyond, at the impossible beauty of it all. Why, she asked, why did you hide? Why did you lock away the second network? Why did you wait so long? There was a pause. Then the voice continued, and there was something in it that sounded almost like sadness. When we built the gates, we believed we were bringing the galaxy together, allowing life to share and grow and become something greater than any single species could be alone. And in many ways we succeeded. Civilizations flourished. Knowledge spread. The darkness between the stars became less dark. But we also saw what connection did. Species changed each other, merged with each other until the original patterns were lost. The diversity that had made the galaxy so wonderful began to fade. Everyone became more similar, more alike, less unique. The voice grew softer. We realized that originality was precious, that the ability to see the universe with fresh eyes was rare and valuable. So we began to protect it. We hid worlds where life could evolve in isolation. We locked away the second network, which would have connected everything to everything, because we feared it would finish the process of homogenization. We waited for someone who could still think thoughts that no one else had ever thought. And then you came. Looked at the sphere, her constant companion for these past weeks. It pulsed gently, warmly, like the heartbeat of a friend. What do you want from me? We want to give you a choice, the voice answered. The second network is ready. It can be activated at any time. It would connect every world in the galaxy, including all those we hid away. All those species that evolved in isolation, just as your species did. It would bring the original diversity back to a galaxy that has lost it. But it would also change everything. The civilizations that exist now would have to share space with species they have never met. Old assumptions would crumble. New conflicts might arise. The future would become unpredictable in ways that we cannot imagine. The gate pulsed with light. We are too old to make this choice, too far removed from what life is. We need someone who is still new, still fresh, someone who can decide with hope instead of fear. Understood now. The architects were not gods. They were not all-knowing or all-powerful. They were simply old, so old that they had lost the ability to see the universe the way she could see it. They needed her precisely because she was young, because she was ordinary, because she could still be surprised. She thought about Earth, about the small blue planet where she had been born, where her grandmother had sung songs about mountains and rivers and the moon. She thought about humanity, so new to the stars, still stumbling through the galaxy like a child learning to walk. She thought about all the hidden worlds out there, all the species that had evolved in isolation, just like humans, all the fresh perspectives waiting to be shared, all the original thoughts that had never been thought. And she thought about the fear of the Council, the ancient civilizations that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. They would resist change. They would fight to protect their power. Activating the second network would create chaos and confusion and possibly even war. But it would also create hope. It would bring something new to a galaxy that had grown stale. It would remind all those ancient species what it felt like to be young, what it felt like to be surprised. Reached out and touched the sphere one final time. "I accept," she said. "Open the door, activate the network, let the originals come home." The voice of the architect seemed to smile. "Very well, child of Earth, very well." Light exploded from the gate, light that reached across the galaxy in an instant, light that touched every hidden world, every protected species, every isolated civilization that had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Gates opened everywhere, in the dead zones that no ship had ever explored, in the dark spaces between stars, in places that even the had forgotten about. And through those gates came the originals, thousands of species, millions of individuals, all of them unchanged, all of them new, all of them carrying thoughts and ideas that no one in the galaxy had ever encountered before. The future became unpredictable. The future became possible. Watched through her viewing window as the galaxy transformed around her. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she had made the right choice. She only knew that she had made an honest choice, based on hope instead of fear, based on wonder instead of caution. The sphere settled into her lap, warm and content. It had completed its purpose after 11,000 years of waiting. And somewhere, in the hearts of beings across a billion worlds, something that had been sleeping began to wake up. The universe was new again. And the cleaning girl from Earth had made it so. She smiled, pressed play on her grandmother's music player, and listened to the old songs as the stars around her began to dance.